also for our clients, because covering an area such as the whole world, we need to tap into sources of information which we can't find firsthand. And luckily, digitalization has opened up many doors and sources for us to tap into to obtain the crucial intelligence which is needed for trade and investment facilitation. So without having to be on the ground in a certain area. And we recognized this need a long time ago. I've been working in this field since 2008. And in that time, we developed our first software platform called locationselector.com. So we found an algorithm to benchmark locations and capturing data, on the one hand, public available data. We worked with a team uploading the data, because in those days, often the data was not available digitally. So reports had to be translated into a digital language and uploaded into the system. And on the other hand, we were also partnering with other business intelligence firms like the EIU, the European, the Economist Intelligence Unit, sorry, EIU. So what we did was capture all this data into this tool and also develop the algorithm to be able to benchmark locations. So basically increasing the efficiency of desktop research. So in assisting companies in their global expansion projects, they were depending very much on the first phase being desk research. So looking based on their business case, tapping into different resources, into finding the right information, going across 1,800 location factors, which we take into consideration in our site selection process. And then from that point, making a short list of locations, and then physically actually going there and meeting with stakeholders and obtaining more fine-tuned information. So what we did was we automated that whole first phase of desk research by developing this tool. And this tool was, on the one hand, used in our own work, on the other hand, also used by companies, large multinational companies with large departments doing research. And on the other hand, also used by governments and investment promotion agencies in order for them to be able to benchmark themselves against other locations to find out what investors were looking for and how they score or rank in comparison to competing locations.
Lovely. Thank you for that insightful response. However, I'm going to continue to ask you one more thing. Oftentimes, lay personnel, they confuse business intelligence with business analytics. How are the two different?
Okay, so in my view, business intelligence would be a more broader term than analytics. So business intelligence is another word for information. So it's business information which you can obtain and now which has become digitally more available. So and analytics, business analytics includes a process. So I just also mentioned in our tool, which we developed, locationselector.com, we developed the algorithm to be able to process this information to come up with a location benchmark. So it's basically, on the one hand, we're capturing the information. On the other hand, we're also processing the information in order to present it in a way that it's relevant to whoever's looking for this information. Because on the one hand, we can obtain a lot of information, but how are we going to process all this information? So we want to have analytics in the form of algorithms to be able to process this information and present it in a way that it's readily usable and relevant to what we need to use this intelligence or information for.
Right. Thank you very much for that response. Mr. Sardar Abubakr, do we have you on the line? Thank you. So, similar question, because I have been asking a lot of people this, the difference between BI and PA, and I found something interesting while I was researching. The vice president of engineering in Magnitude Software, he said that business intelligence is needed to run the businesses, while business analytics are needed to change the business. What would your take be on this? And how can BI contribute to growth within a business?
Sure. You know, Anza, thanks for having me. I hope you can hear me well, loud and clear. Just my views on this. At the end of the day, any business intelligence or analytics has to be about serving the customer better, right? So from a customer point of view, really, come on, it shouldn't make any difference whether we label it intelligence or analytics. These are, in my two humble sense, views. These are just, connotations that we in the corporate world will like to spend time on deciphering. Of course, I totally agree with what Zoe said. Intelligence is a broader term, right? It includes a lot of more data sets, and analytics is one of them. But in terms of how it can be leveraged to run a business, I'll just make 4 quick points. The first is that for any analytics and intelligence to work, you need standardization of data. I remember I was having a chat with the chief data officer of Telefonica at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona many years ago. He used a terminology I can't repeat here, but basically what he was saying is that if you don't put the right data sets as an input in the process, you're not going to get the right outputs. So first and foremost, organizations must ensure that they have the right data sets inbuilt into any analytic system. Data standardization is key. It's often overlooked. It's often undermined. If you're going to feed junk into an information system, you're only going to get junk out of it. So I think that's number one. Number two, the richness of data for better customer offers, better customer decisions only happens when you can stitch multiple data sets. So if I'm giving an offer to a customer and my analytics engine is just revolving around that offer set, it's not factoring in any other third-party data that tells me more about the customer, my view of the customer will be extremely myopic. It will be singular. It will not be the multidimensional customer that we see today. The third thing I will say is that organizations, whether they're using BI and BA for customer-facing decisions or back-end efficiency, you can use analytics for efficiency, automation. No matter what your objective is, you must democratize analytics and intelligence. This concept where you have dashboards just in the CEO's room and the rest of the organization is running around trying to find out what the basic data sets are showing. BI must be democratized. Dashboards for each level of decision making must be available to every last person in the organization, whether you're 1,500 people or whether you're 50,000 people. And I think the last thing I will say, though, is that while analytics and intelligence is really, really key, at some stage, organizations need a balance. You can easily get into what we call analysis paralysis. And again, I'd like to quote another example here. We were having this talk with 2 companies. One is a leading a marketplace for buying and selling cars in Pakistan, and there was another company. And I remember I spoke to the founder of the marketplace for buying and selling cars, and I said, what was your recommendation agent? What kind of data analytics did you use to make this so successful? And he said, well, Abubakr, you know what? A lot of 5 or 6 facts are well established in the market. This is what the customer needs. So, and while he put it simplistically, my point is that we must avoid what we call in certain organizations analysis paralysis. And that's where you lose agility. The whole concept of intelligence and analytics must be to make quicker, swifter decisions as opposed to getting bogged down. We do that. So we have almost 2 billion rupees worth of portfolio in what we call digital lending. That is without any physical interface, using a complete credit scoring model, and lending on a micro loans to customers. And I think that's been working quite successfully. That's one example, but these would be my 4 recommendations, Anza.
Thank you very much. And we're excited to hear more of what you're going to share with us today. Mr. Shaukat Ali Khan. So what do you see as some of the potential roadblocks, elaborating from what Sardar Abubakr said? What do you see as some of the potential roadblocks for business intelligence, especially in the Pakistan context?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me here. I agree with what my colleague said. I think the biggest roadblocks are the right tools, right processes, and right capacity of using this one. Because in my view, I think business intelligence or business analytics, these are the drivers of transformation. Because you can only get the data if you have proper processes in place. If you can only get data if you have proper connectivity within the different systems are in place, if you have the right and correct data is available, then you will be able to get out of this. So I think I think there are some prerequisites to go towards the business intelligence and business analytics, and then the use of these technologies. First thing is the proper connectivity within the systems. You have the right tools, you have the right data sets, and you have the right capacity. In the Pakistani context, I think I can see that a lot of us, we talk about all these buzzwords, but when we go to the details, it's very difficult to find right people. For example, I have been looking for a director data and analytics from last 6 months. I'm not finding a right competent, right match of competencies. So it's a very, very difficult part on the capacity point of view. So I think the biggest roadblock in Pakistan and where we need to focus is the capacity building. We are talking about all these technologies, but what are we doing about enhancing our capacity to bringing right skills, to train our people and to retain our people? That's one. Another one is our digital infrastructure. For example, across the country, right? We are in the right path, but a lot needs to be done. More in that part of it, so that we have the infrastructure to use all these technologies. Because whether I think I agree with Abubakr and Zoe what they said about the difference between BI and BA or those things. It's like collecting the data from the right resources and then making use of it for future decisions. And you can only do those things once you have the basic foundation ready with you. So I think from my point of view, two important things are there. Right skill set and then right tools.
Absolutely. I think very pertinent points. The right skill set is very important. And Zoe, going back to where we were talking about, you mentioned a lot of successful use cases, and I know that you've been involved with working with governments and private sector and taking some very important decisions, and that obviously puts the onus of future growth on the advisory board or council or the company that's offering BI. How stressful can that be, and how rewarding is the growth factor that you see with the companies or governments that you work with?
I'm not sure if I understood your question correctly. So the growth factors in terms of, maybe if you could repeat.
Yes, so I'm going to elaborate on what I said. So since you have been advising the governments and private sector in terms of strategic consultancy, when we talk about business intelligence in particular, and let's say there are some bad decisions that happen, how much of that is held to be your responsibility? And if you could sort of narrate some examples to us.
So being held to our responsibility, you mean? So in terms of, from an ethical point of view, I think every organization, well, it actually starts on an individual level. Everyone is individually responsible for all these processes. And this is I always say, take responsibility, take ownership. And it doesn't matter if you're working in a private sector organization or in a governmental organization.
And that's a very pertinent point that you've made. And I would like for you to, speak about it a little more, because a lot of organizations, and I'm speaking in the South Asian context of things, they do not want to take the responsibility of their own decisions. Right? Please carry on.
Okay, thank you. Now, I think this is a very interesting topic, which I hold close to my heart, because I think the way the world is developing at such a fast pace, there's disruption, and also in terms of organizational structures, whether these are private entities or governmental entities. But also, I get so many questions during my trainings and lectures, and everyone asks me, like, I want to do this, but how do I do it? A change always starts with yourself. So take ownership, take responsibility. You don't have to be in a leadership role formally within the organizational structure to take initiative, be a leader, and take responsibility. That will be rewarded at a later stage. I always trust that. And in terms of data and digitalization, also, as human beings, we need to take responsibility, because these tools are available and these tools are amazing, and technology, we should embrace that. However, it doesn't take away any responsibility from our side. So we need to be responsible for, first of all, the development of technology and the ethical application of it. And second of all, also be responsible for whatever decisions we make based upon the business intelligence, so the tools, so the data resources or the sources, as well as the tools which we apply. So it doesn't take away from our human responsibility. And this is something we must never forget. And recently, for a project, I've been benchmarking different business intelligence tools, because we needed to tap into certain sources of information which I wasn't familiar with yet. So I did some research, compared different tools, requested demos, and trying to get a feel of which tool I thought was of the correct quality which we were seeking. And there's a huge variation in quality of business intelligence. So just to solely base a decision on business intelligence, not taking your responsibility, we need to be discerning and knowing what we are tapping into and trusting. So if that answers your question.
Thank you very much, Zoe, and I'll come back to you later. Mr. Sardar Abubakr, are you still with us?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Lovely. Now, you said something very interesting about, democratization of analytics, and in the context of most companies, that means that not just limiting the analysis or dashboards to the higher management. Don't you think that poses a risk to the integrity of, especially in terms of the financial sector? Don't you think it will compromise on a lot?
No, my answer would be no. Of course, I think you're very, very right that there are risks associated with the digitization journey that almost all organizations are on. Cybersecurity is a big risk. Customer information is a big risk. We've seen that recently in the financial services sector in Pakistan as well, where you would have probably seen the news around a lot of issues that large corporate banks have faced when it comes to information breaches. Having said that, why did I answer no? When I say democratization of data, I'm referring to that each level of management, each organizational level in the company to the last person should have access to data that is necessary for his or her job. They should not have access to data that is not necessary for them to be the very best at what they do. The challenge I do feel is that if you ask the last person in the organization as to what tools and information is available around the work that they do, if they can give you a good answer that, you know what, I have access to these 4 tools or these 4 reports, and I know they exist, and I get this report on the basis, and I actually can make actionable decisions on the basis of it, great. But if the last person says, I don't even know what capabilities exist in the organization for me to be able to do my job better, that's where the democratization of data comes in. And too many corporate sector companies have BI departments that don't work collaboratively with the wider organization.
Yes, they're working in silos. And
absolutely. So I think a success of any function such as BI is whether you replicate BI in each unit of the company. If the BI function can replicate BI in every unit of the company, trust me, Anza, that company has a competitive advantage like no other. Of course, like I said, is why you want to use BI needs to be very, very clear, right? Let's be clear, organizations are driven by shareholder prerogative. And sometimes the focus is on growth. Sometimes the focus, and when I say growth, it could be revenues and higher margins. It could be an increase in customer base at losses. So you need to know what your organizational priority is. When you're deploying any BI capability or business analytics capability, you must know what is the key metric for success. Is it number of users at a loss? Is it a 50% profit margin? Is it number one revenue share? All of these strategies are completely different, necessitate different skill sets and different approaches. And I think that it would be a miss if the BI strategy is not aligned with this.
If I may, I would like to ask you one more question in this round of questions that I'm asking. I was reading a report by PwC, and it was something very interesting that was said. It said that 86% of executives around the top firms in the world say that AI will be a mainstream technology at their company in 2021, which sort of translates to the fact that AI will be the new BI. Do you agree with this statement?
Not in Pakistan. Excuse my blunt answers, but not in Pakistan. We operate in a market where still feature phones are sold more than smartphones, where the smartphone penetration has improved, but is hovering at around 50%, with a way to go, where the cost of deployment of connectivity is still quite high. Spectrum acquisition costs, and at the same time, spectrum deployment costs, smartphone penetration in the market still needs a development. All of these technologies, whether it's AI, whether it's VR, they require investment in technology, they require investment in infrastructure, and those investments need a return on investment. What you will see is that you do see a lot of robotics. While you would not call it pure AI, you will see a lot of robotics deployed in terms of customer handling, customer support. That has been probably the first use case that organizations, regardless of the sector that they're in, Anza, have been using robotics to try and get good decision making. At the same time, when you talk about artificial intelligence and you talk about leveraging those use cases, is there a return on investment in Pakistan right now? Yes, midterm, of course. Why not? Organizations must digitize, but let's also know our realities, right? We are right now in the midst of a global pandemic. Our inflation rate is rising, and the bulk of the sector, and why did I say no to that answer you asked? The bulk of the sector is not the large corporates, Anza. They're the SME. More than half or almost half plus of Pakistan's GDP is from the SME market. Do you think the SME entrepreneur would be investing in AI? I seriously doubt it. So yes, mid to long term, absolutely. And lastly, I will say this, Anza, that sometimes a lot of us, and I also often make the mistake of this as well, focus on technology, and technology has never been the problem. We need to find customer use cases for technology. Kodak had one of the first rights to the digital camera. They did nothing with it. Technology is not the issue. AI, VR, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G will come. are you making it into monetizable, customer-centric business use cases that make money? I think that's something that will be a challenge with all of these technologies and for digital entrepreneurs to crack. And if they crack it, then these will be deployed. If they don't crack it, it'll be limited.
Yes, so you think banks are one of the first ones to crack it with KYC
No,
and the
I think banks, and I'll make a general point here, have been a little behind the curve in terms of, the first point I made in terms of data standardization and data lakes. Without going into details, you'll find that a lot of the banks did not even probably have data warehouses. And Zoe and the other Shaukat know these much better than I. An amalgamation of the data points from various core systems. Many of the banks did not have a data warehouse where the various systems would actually produce information in a central way. The telecom companies have been pretty ahead in this. The telecom companies invested in these technologies 10 years, allowing for a return on investment with robust recommendation engines. We see it with some of the commercial banks now. There's a way to go. And I think what will be a game changer, and I said this in a few forums, is where business intelligence is used for merchant lending. The small medium enterprise financing market is a 5 trillion market that is dying for it to be served. The mass use case is the use case because of which all the startups are raising funding. So the banks that can crack merchant financing at scale with business intelligence and credit scoring will have valuations like the next Careem and Uber of Pakistan.
Hopefully, we do live in exciting times indeed. Thank you for being so candid. And Mr. Shaukat Ali Khan, my next question is for you. And it was interesting how you mentioned that in the Pakistan context in particular, we can't harness the power of BI because we are lacking people with the relevant skill sets. How do you think this can be improved on, and what is the role that industry academia linkages can play here?
I think there are a couple of things that we can do. Number one, we have the right. I can see from the government also from last at least 1-2 years that they are more interested into technology. What is important now is that link academia with the industry of what is needed. Our curriculum, for example, all the new students who are coming, they are when we do interviews with a lot of institutions. Some are really, really good, but a lot of institutions, they need to relate their curriculum with what is needed out there. What is the demand for tomorrow? So I think there is a huge potential of partnering academia with government and the private sector, so that our curriculum, our courses, whatever we are offering, our skill set, what we are developing for our future pipelines, they are aligned with what is needed from our end. So I think that this is a really good potential area, and these type of forums like CXO, you are doing an amazing job bringing all the technology leaders on one platform, and then who are sharing their knowledges. I think these type of things are needed, but more into academia, that especially our reflection on the current courses, reflection on what we are offering when we are graduating, and what skill set we are giving to our students so they can go out and then serve in the market. I think that needs to be reflected. With regards to our own, for example, Aga Khan University, we have, of course, data warehouse. We practice modern technologies, and then one of our role is, of course, to bring best practices from all over the world, so that our people here, wherever we operate, whether it's in Pakistan or East Africa or other parts, so that our people can practice and experience the first world experiences. So I think these experiences needs to be more connected with civil society, with the government, with the institutions, so that more and more people can actually be ready for the future.
Right, some very pertinent points made indeed. Zoe, coming back to you, Mr. Shaukat Ali Khan said some very interesting things, and also the democratization of data that was mentioned by Sardar Abubakr also leads us to data literacy. Now, according to Gartner, it's the ability to read, write, and communicate data in context. To putting it simply, the ability to speak data. Strong data literacy is the key to also increasing user adoption and maximizing the effectiveness of BI tools like the ones that you're working with. It's important for individuals, it's important for businesses, and being able to interpret this data and discover insights, maybe ask the right questions, are skills that anyone can develop maybe and utilize to drive change at any role or at any organization. How do you think this can be made possible in the future, and how important do you think data literacy is for the next generation to come?
Thank you, Anza. This is a very interesting question. I'm going to go in the reverse order. So I'm going to start with your last question. So how important is data literacy for the future generation? I would say it is key. It is key to be able to work with data, know how to find it. Data is abundantly available already, becoming more and more available, but we need to develop the skill set which schools and training facilities should be responsible for, to learn how to seek for the relevant data and find the right data, and being able to obtain it and to process it in a way in which it becomes usable and relevant. So this is key. We are moving into a world, I've been looking into the future of work, and generally speaking, no one has an answer to what future jobs are going to look like. However, there is consensus on that digitalization is going to be key, and all standard processes in jobs which can be automated or digitalized will be. So this will not particularly mean that there are not going to be any more jobs for humans, only the way we will be working will be differently. So we are going to be much more driving the data tools, or we have to be smart at where to find data, how to process it, and how we can apply it to whatever we are, whatever function we have, and what the objective is, what we need to achieve. So we're in a transitional period, which is being heavily accelerated at the moment, also through COVID, but the technological developments were going at an incredible pace in any case before COVID. So basically our human mental capacity can hardly capture what the pace at which it is going on. However, data and digitalization is here to stay. So, or the digitalization of data, let's say, put it that way. So yes, it's key. Luckily, our children are learning at a very early age how to work with digital tools. They're already playing on the iPad, they're playing with the PlayStation software, they are using, well, especially also with COVID, they were accustomed to even getting education through digital platforms. So they are much more tech savvy than the older generations. So I don't foresee huge challenges there. Yes, of course, there are always challenges, but they are there to overcome. So that's one aspect. On the other hand, regarding the viability of data, I think it's all about, on the one hand, developing the skills. On the other hand, the companies providing business intelligence tools and analytics. I mean, the environment is highly competitive. So they have the responsibility to provide the data, which was already mentioned, in a way which is usable for the customer. So understanding what this data needs to be utilized for, so knowing the requirements of the customer and being able to build that bridge between sourcing the data and processing the data, and then the interface with the end user. So the companies being able to do that will be able to keep up with their game. And
right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you there for a second, because you have shed a lot of light in the impact of BI on companies and private businesses. Now let's talk about some of your expertise. So governments and how can BI lead to more FDI, foreign direct investments in a country, or perhaps maybe some of your work with special economic zones?
Yes, well, BI is key, and having developed, for instance, the location selector tool, there were always areas in which we could, or regions in which we could fairly easily obtain data, like in Europe or the US. In Asia, there was a huge variation. And then, for instance, in Africa, it was really challenging. So if you could see how we were obtaining data was really difficult. And what was also already mentioned during this panel is that standardization of data is very important, that we are comparing apples with apples and not apples with oranges or apples with pears. So in this sense, this is hugely challenging, definitely if you're working on a global scale. And what we are also seeing, so governments, if they are looking to attract FDI, we are always advising them on making data available, because investment decisions are being made on the basis of data and analytics. So the more they have available, it's not only the availability of data, but also relevant data and up-to-date data. And then in an even better scenario, we would have governments collaborate on providing standardized data, which is relevant. And within the digital spectrum, we're actually right now involved with some projects, also with the zones, in developing single windows. So digital portals also for investors to be able to have one point of entry, being able to, first of all, obtain all the relevant information upon which they can make their investment decision. But secondly, also, if they've decided to locate in a certain geography, also being able to go through all the procedures of registering their operations through one single portal. So it's a company registration, it's the licensing, setting up a bank account, applying for visas for employees, and so on and so on. So then there also is that is within one geography, is aligning all the different government agencies to be able to capture all this information in one single window. So this is already often quite a challenge. It depends on the country. Then we also have the instance of trade flows. So if we're looking at supply chains, we're also looking at connecting free zones together. So ultimately, economic zones or free trade zones are being developed to facilitate trade. So they attract foreign direct investment, but how do they attract that investment if they're good at facilitating trade? Because these companies are locating there because they want to, they want the ease of doing business. On the one hand, they're getting offered incentives packages in terms of tax advantages, reduced regulatory bottlenecks, but on the other hand, a zone needs to be able to facilitate the business and needs a support for the government to do so, because there are many regulations involved. The infrastructure needs to be there, the physical infrastructure, but also the digital infrastructure. So the connectivity physically as well as digitally all needs to be in place in order to be able to attract investment and facilitate trade. So we've been looking also at customs integrations within the zones. What are the bottlenecks there in terms of digitalization? So what is needed to pre-clear goods, harmonization of certificates of origin. And there you see all these systems coming together and different data sets, and how you're going to integrate them into one platform, being able to overcome all these hurdles and to streamline all the players within supply chains and ultimately global value chains.
Thank you very much. That was amazing. And we're going to move on to Mr. Shaukat Ali Khan. We're running low on time here. Sir, it has been an interesting discussion, but I would like to hear your final thoughts on today's discussion.
Yeah, I think this is an important discussion, very important area. And I think from the company point of view, from the government point of view, I think this is the key. The business intelligence gives you the right data, and with the analytics, it's forward thinking for your future decisions. This is the data. I think what is important is that you have the mechanism to collect the right data with very few errors, so that you can rely on that data to do your future decisions. So I think my final thoughts are three things. One is the companies should first properly digitize their data. From what I mean by digitize is that introducing processes, connecting systems, so that there is a source to collect all the data, and then based on the data, then if the data is right, then it will help them for their future focus areas. It will help them for the trends of what they're getting, and it will also help to optimize the overall efficiency, and in addition to transparency and all those different things. So right processes, focus on digitalization, right investments, because sometimes we expect that everything should be digitized, but we are not ready to invest on digitalization from the tools point of view, from the resources point of view. I think that is an area where we need to see. And from the government point of view, I think it's very important to, yes, we are talking a lot, which is really great, but we need to do the right things. We need to put the right people on the right places so that they can build strategies, so that the government can then start actually implementing and harnessing all these digital platforms.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Abubakr. So before we go on to hearing your final comments on the topic, there's just one last thing that I'd like to ask you. And there's been a lot of emphasis on the standardization of data. And as you mentioned, most businesses here are not big corporations with SMEs, and the costs, to be honest, of standardization of data are higher than what would be ideal. Do you think that most businesses should take this as an investment or as a cost? And then I would like to hear your final thoughts. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for this fantastic discussion, Anza. Of course, ideally, we would want all companies, regardless of their size, to regard investment in data analytics, business intelligence as an investment. I will say, though, that companies need to chart their own growth journeys, depending on where they are in the life cycle. Good old-fashioned design thinking and customer interviews and research can also work. Again, they need to solve customer problems, and whatever is the best way to solve customer problems according where they are in terms of their finances, that would be the best. Data analytics companies inevitably have better valuation. So as soon as they can, if they can start investing in data analytics, it will be beneficial for the long term. I think my last point will be something that I'll just echo what the comments Shaukat and Zoe made, and they touched upon something really important, and they spoke about the need of youngsters and students to know how to work with data, understand data analytics, and a lot of students and aspiring entrepreneurs and people who are just coming into the professional studies, they ask what skill sets should have, what should they look for in a company. If they want to be recruited, they need to know what's in demand. And what Zoe and Shaukat have said is absolutely spot on, that regardless of what role you're in, you need to now know how to work with data. And I think my message would be to the youngsters now, we've spoken enough about the companies and the government. Anyone who's coming into the professional world, whether it's their own business now or whether it's a job, have basic understanding of data science, have basic understanding of patterns and data analytics. I'm not talking about complex mathematics. And then you can upgrade your skills. You'll be in demand. So that would be my closing comment.
Right, and that's something very important that you said. And thanks to NLP's natural language programming, we've made it that much easier for people who don't have very strong technical background to be able to understand data effectively. Zoe, with that, I would like you to please sum up your take home from today's discussion.
Okay, thank you, Anza.
Thank you.
So I agree with what has been said so far. And first of all, it's taking responsibility for your own skill enhancement in terms of being able to find the right data and to utilize the right data. Also, within the future of work, it's definitely a matter of self-education. So asking, okay, which kind of college or university do I need to do? Yes, that's important to obtain a degree, but on the other hand, we need to constantly update our own skill set. And thanks to the internet, we have a lot of information already freely available to us. Then second of all, the standardization of data. So looking at how we can make data available in a way that it's easier to work with it and easier to analyze it. So the interface, and also therefore is very much needed, which I always emphasize, is partnerships and collaboration. So we need partnerships between all stakeholders to be able to collaborate and harmonize the data which is available, and facilitating the digitalization process. And what was also touched upon, which I think is really important, is good governance, transparency, and this is all essential in moving towards a future in which prosperity can be available to all regions in the world, coming down to transparency and compliance.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you very much for being with us today. I would like to applaud the esteemed panelists for sharing these valuable insights, and CXO Global. Congratulations on another day of the Digital Summit. And my one take home from this discussion today is something that I'd read in Gartner. It said that even though information is the oil of the 21st century, analytics and intelligence is the combustion engine. And I think that in itself says a lot. Thank you very much for being with us. And, we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Much.
Thank you very much.